This is a loosely coupled show with James Hickey and Comartin. If you're new to this channel, we chat about software architecture and design. Make sure to subscribe to get all our latest episodes.
So I guess I'll introduce you, Adam. We'll probably maybe start, cut it off here. I don't know. Derek's in charge of that.
I just edit shit.
Slicing,
we can just have outtakes. We can just put the bloopers at the end, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, you've been in the industry for a long time. Because you've been doing CQRS distributed stuff since it began, and then even before then you were in the industry.
Yeah, I was without it. But yeah, I think when I met Greg in the tail end of 2007 is when my renaissance started.
Yeah, I mean, we can get right into, I have a few notes here, and for me, getting into DDD definitely was a huge help. It still is a huge help. But there is, for me, there's always this feeling that it doesn't have to be so complicated.
DDD helped me DDD did help me as well. But I think in hindsight, it was a vehicle for Greg to get CQRS and event sourcing out, specifically CQRS.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a difference, but they're highly related, and people say that they can do one without the other and vice versa. But truth is that CQRS kind of exists everywhere, and event sourcing exists everywhere. That's my controversial thing that I say because it does.
I don't know that. Well, it's not controversial with me, but when you said DDD was a vehicle, I think it's been anybody that's kind of fallen in the path of even now of discovering CQRS, event sourcing, event storming, event modeling. I think it all stems from DDD, but I'm still lost. I guess there are, I don't know why it was the vehicle.
I think I'll clarify that. I think it was the community vehicle, because that was the place where talking about CQRS made sense in terms of what the next hot thing in enterprise development was going to be, and scaling large systems like banks and whatever. And that's where you could kind of get the edification for your concept. If you could stand up in front of Eric Evans and Martin Fowler and present on a topic and have them say, that's interesting. I want to try that. I can't poke a hole through this argument yet. I'll try, but it was that kind of thing. And, Greg talks about being nervous at QCon in San Francisco back in 2005 or 2006 or whatever, starting to talk about these concepts and saying that, he was talking 1,000 miles an hour, nervous, and, that kind of stuff. He actually snuck me into QCon SF back in 2009. It was kind of funny. I was there without a badge, bumming around, Fowler looking at me like, who the fuck are you? Anyway, fun times. So yeah, I think that's kind of it's more about the community and about where the world was at that point. Agile still wasn't as widely adopted, and so there was still a lot more involvement from architects within solutions than currently are. I think there's a lot of architect versus Agile battles that happen more now than before. And then they got criticized from being armchair architects, and you guys don't know how to write code. You're just ivory tower kind of mentality, and we have to, deal with the shit you throw on us, and you didn't consider X, Y, and Z. You don't know how these new libraries work, and, and then Rails took off because of that, and just a whole messy history, right? Could, just rant on that and go down rabbit holes trying to see how all this stuff's related to one another. But, yeah, rewinding back, that was kind of where it got a foothold. And because that community had its own, core sort of pillars of strength, like bounded context, ubiquitous language, and those kind of really strategic things that are really powerful and people really like. And then they also had their tactical things. And I think the hook for event sourcing was the fact that you could get a foothold for event sourcing and something concrete from domain-driven design. That was the concept of the aggregate. It's like, hey, look, I got the whole history for this entity. Awesome. Why don't we just use that? So it was a kind of like it just clicked, right? And then, as we move forward through that, we start to realize that, wait a second, there's kind of like streams, and we can start looking at events as kind of stream processing, having an audit trail of a log, and just, those were good guidelines to at least introduce people to the concept, but we can start to look at, well, I don't need to hydrate an entire aggregate to just complete the order, right? I would like to change the address of the order, but do I need to hydrate the whole thing to see what the things are in there? No, I don't, right? I just need a subset of that stream. So now it looks like I'm just doing some indexing and lookups on parts of the stream. And that could be big, right? That could be replaying, 1,000 events, or just querying for the 2 that I want to change the address to see whether, this is realistic. Is this person changing the address to be a different country? Whatever. It has its own little business rules there, but I certainly don't want to bother looking at the rest of the events about whatever was added and removed from the basket. That doesn't matter anymore for this purpose, right? So I kind of talk about that in my meetup constantly, about being able to refine our insight into the information that we have, and see how we can do better and optimize what we know and move on to the next thing. And I'm guessing there's a lot of things that happen with any community, and I'm sure the same thing will happen with event modeling and other things, is that it becomes like, this is the goal. This is the thing where everyone should be like, going in 2009, man, I love DDD. If I could just have everyone end up here, the world would be better, and everything in software would be solved. We wouldn't have to solve software anymore, and we could just move on to other things. But the truth is, it's just a step on the way. And so is event modeling. It's just a step on the way to better things, right? And so if you stand still, you stop learning. And I'm guessing it's tough to keep a community moving forward without changing the fundamentals. But once you make that quantum leap to something else, that other, it's a local maxima, you find other higher local maximas. There probably are others that you don't know yet, but you have to realize that there's only so much that designing an aggregate is only going to get you so much. Like, the next step is to not use an aggregate to be better, right? Especially if you have performance or other, maybe it's fine, but maybe some concerns like performance might be where you stop, using aggregates in your implementation.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think about, and this has been said over and over again with DDD, or at least I think it has been, is just there's still like, there's people new to it, and you kind of alluded to it, that they really get attached to the technical aspect of it, the technical patterns. And then everybody else that's kind of like, okay, been there, done that. It's like, okay, who cares about that stuff necessarily? I more care about boundaries and language, and those are the things that I think that's where DDD is really more elevated to. Like, if there's things that have come out of it, it has been towards that stuff.
Yeah.
So, like, where does event like how do you feel like the natural progression of where, like you're saying, you got into DDD, you're, in the grassroots here of like event sourcing, where does it all start mixing together for you? Like, how does pieces start coming together?
Yeah, it's I think along DDD was really CQRS and event sourcing, and absolutely I loved the fact that I could have a history of things, of what happened, how I got there, have breadcrumb trails to find out where I got to, and being able to replay all the events all the time to see what my new insights could be. I think and DDD kind of started to give me the bounded context, and like, hey, this is kind of how we could potentially dissolve, basically separate out a large system into small subsystems and bounded contexts, and use proper language within groups, and that observes Conway's law, and so that we have these teams that are talking about the same things, and language is really strong, so the communication barriers are kind of removed, which is great. However, then I just started to look more at the information piece because Greg's kind of teachings were always from his experience in high performance systems, where it was really about the data. He was in the DDD space, but his sort of fun stuff that he loves to work on is the high performance things, where it's really about the mechanics of CQRS, the treating the write side differently than the read side, that gives you, all these options to just make a super awesome system where you proudly can do millions of transactions a second, right? He'll always talk about real-time trading systems, real-time gambling systems, all that kind of stuff, because that's the thing that, gives him that edge over everything else. Like, hey, you have a really good database. I'm just going to show you how I can do this. That's going to be nearly as fast as shoving stuff into dev null. It'll make your head spin. So that's his thing, and he's a very competitive guy, and so I think it's about having a very good idea of what all the information is in the system and how it's changing, and how you perceive state, either through finite state machines or whatever, how you actually understand state, whether it's through distributed systems and eventual consistency of having nodes that are in, in agreement, or you can have a cluster where you can rely on it to give you good information to make your decisions and to continue to do that, right? I mean, one of the things that I was able to contribute to CQRS was Paxos at the time in 2008. That kind of all the consensus stuff was still not baked into all the talks about it, and so being able to contribute at least one thing to it was really good. And later, Raft and Raft-like consensus algorithms were kind of the optimization of those consensus approaches, and I think James Nugent ended up basically making Raft a Raft-like consensus thing without knowing that there was the Raft PhD paper being written at the same time by Diego. So it's kind of funny, just same things kind of merged at this. It's like what's the type of evolution? Co-something or separated convergent evolution, like when species converge to do the same thing, but they're actually not genetically linked. So we have a lot of that in like, you also see RDTs, right, with Martin Kleppman from LinkedIn's and all of his work is done also with being able to have consistency done. So all these different, and then of course, blockchain, right, and Casper protocols and all these other things, they're all kind of around like, who has the truth? What can we rely upon, and how can we get that reliability as fast as possible? So Paxos was kind of like the start of that for me to study all those things. And in doing all this kind of stuff about information correctness and all of that, I noticed that I'm looking at the molecules of water in snowflakes, right? And I started to look at the business solutions that were all line of business types of things, your insurance companies, your point of sale systems. It's just same information going left to right. There's nothing really interesting there. And so I started to see that these were the kind of molecules that make up the water molecules that make up these snowflakes. I no longer had to study a whole bunch of different shaped snowflakes. I just needed to understand water. That's what event sourcing and CQRS became to me. It's really fundamentally getting the E equals MC squared kind of insight into the physical world, that I didn't have to hide behind a million different formulas just to understand how matter worked. And so event sourcing is really that. Event modeling came from that, basically a convergence of two things. It was basically Greg's idea about serialized or in-series events could describe any state, and you can make projections off of those. You can have a functional look into that to understand multiple models off of one set of, a canonical truth of events that has high auditability. That actually serves quite well for specification by example. It says, given that these events happened, my shopping cart looks like this, or given that these events happened, I can't add any more to my shopping cart, like an actual, change. I can reject a command or accept a command. So that's quite good, because we could describe a whole bunch of scenarios. We could do a bunch of given when then specification by example. People that want to know about BDD, they could do really, really well with this, and really move all the stuff out of the way that was kind of making it hard to do BDD before, like having to automate UIs and make DSLs and all this other crap that you just don't need anymore. You just say, these are the events that happened, and you either see this or you don't see this, or you can do this command or you can't. And if you can do this command, all you're doing is just adding another one of these events. So it made it really crystal clear, and you can do that subcutaneous kind of testing, which had meaning. Subcutaneous was kind of a gray area before event sourcing. It was like, well, what do you consider the skin layer of your application? I don't know. I'll go one more level deep, and but you missed out all this stuff, and you go up one, and you're like, oh, now it's all crappy. I'm doing all these stupid edge cases for your UI framework, whatever, right? So we had that problem. I think event sourcing really solved this issue, and so I like that. That was a specification kind of BDD stuff that I was after anyway in Agile, about being able to use the same language with business as I do with the technical side. I mean, Agile was trying to do this with testing for a long time. For the first time, this was actually a reality. Second thing was Alberto kind of looked at DDD. He came from the DDD side of things and looked at, I'll just throw events in to DDD, and I can kind of use this same kind of style, but I'll contribute this workshop style, so that everyone kind of walks up to a whiteboard or a wall with a bunch of parchment paper, and we're going to put up stickies, and we're going to like collaborate about what it is that we have. But that was still the kind of in tune with the problem space, strategic kind of style from DDD, about, what are we trying to solve? What's our understanding? And it's kind of like a one-day event where it started, and just, throw away what you have after that day. The benefit of that exercise was collaboration, having all these people meet from different disciplines, whether you're a tester, business owner, product owner, PM, whatever, anyone, any role, you could collaborate quite freely and quite well, get your ideas out there, and then there would be, that would in itself erase a ton of meetings and would be really good. So now combining the two, the storyline, which is very important from Greg, and then throwing in the fact that no one was really paying attention to the UX UI, having everything from the designers and to the actual continuity of where information was, and having a user focus was basically what event modeling did. And then replacing UML with something that could be not stuck in the how, not having boxes for classes and little interface things and lines for method calls, because then you're just basically drawing what the code is, which is totally doubling the work. And to keep that in sync is just ridiculous. And I've been there. I'm not sure if you have, but back in 2000, that was a thing. That was like, whoa. Can we use this, Visio diagram to now generate code for us?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Like, holy crap, are you kidding me? Like,
yeah.
We were kind of almost there. We just missed one thing. And I go back to Fred Brooks, and this is written about in my blog and all that kind of stuff, but the idea that even in the Mythical Man Month in the 60s, Fred Brooks kind of saw that I don't care how fancy your workflow is, how your what your logic is in your code, your fancy diagrams and flowcharts. Show me your tables in your database, and I'll totally understand what your application does. And that's the importance that was already seen by Fred Brooks in the 60s, that if you know the state and what represents state in your application, you pretty much know the application without looking at the code. Now, unfortunately, in the days of Fred Brooks, the hard drive cost a lot of money. I think it was a 5 megabyte hard drive actually cost $1 million in 1956 from IBM. Weighed a ton, cost $30K to run every month. And that's not inflation adjusted, right? So today that would be probably equivalent of 10 million or something. Who knows? But so while Fred already had that insight, he never had the luxury of storing ledger. And this is how we kind of built society, was on ledger. Every single thing was, it wasn't paper and a pencil with an eraser. It was always ink, and it was things carved in stone. We actually come from the background of humanity being built on ledger and stories, and it's even how our minds work. So there's a lot of this, linear thinking is and accountability is really, really more at home in people's minds than a static set of tables linked and graphs and branching, etc. We want linearity and storytelling, and we want things to kind of go that way. So the insight was really, the aha moment was that, this is kind of the molecule. A state change is the molecule that kind of can describe any system, any information system. I don't say programming because there's like the 1% where someone's doing like some crypto stuff, new algos, whatever. But the day-to-day stuff, 99% of the programming out there is just automating systems. It's like, here's another insurance company, here's another storefront, whatever. It's just as we slice time, state changes this way. That's pretty much it. Now show me example and enough examples of that, and I can hold up what you wrote and see if it actually does that. And that's like the strongest contract I found for being able to show success, and done is done, and all the other things, including even estimates, right? Estimates are like, no estimates because software sucks, right? Like, no, we just suck at making software an engineering practice, and we have a bunch of people with different agendas pushing things to, keep power. And I have kind of a beef with where Agile's been taken by a bunch of people. But, if you really, Agile's become something really restrictive. It hasn't become something that's really giving you freedom. It's been like, if you're not the stand-up, you're fired. Like, what is this? Like, I don't want to be a stand-up. It sucks. Like, I say the same thing, and I'm just here proving to the fellow coworkers that I'm, I'm supposed to be the least likely to be fired, right? And it's this scrum. It's like, okay, it's a war room situation. Everyone's in constant stress. That's not the way I want to work, right? And so,
yeah, it's funny you bring that up too, because I was just having this conversation the other day. It's like, somebody was asking me about what I thought about Scrum, and I said, I don't have a problem with it if everybody knows what the hell they're doing and like why they're doing it. But if you're just doing it, if you're doing a morning stand-up and you have no idea why the hell you're there, and you're alluding to it, it's like some justification of what's going on, and it's you're not being reflective and adaptive to what the hell is going on to begin with. Then why are we even doing this? But I think it just got so prescriptive.
Yeah, no, it's really bad, and I think it's based on the fact that we gave kind of we said something when we accepted Agile. We said that it's not that we don't want design, we just don't want big design up front, and then we just never bothered doing any design at all. Like, just start slapping the keyboard because, hey, we're reactive, we'll just adjust as we go in the next sprint. It's like, what the hell? It's really horrible, and I explain in my blog post about how rework is really the cause of this rising cost curve in projects, and why everything ends in tears with a really badly run project. It also ties into how we don't have a really good way of dealing with integration tests, and that's why the testing pyramid is the way it is. Testing pyramid shouldn't even exist. It should be a testing rectangle where a lot of your integration tests are in the form of unit tests anyway. And we do that through to-do lists and things like that in event modeling to just show how that's done. And it's a constant switch between integration unit, and you don't even realize it because you're using the same mechanics for both. So that's kind of how we get to using a small design. So back to the original point, it's like, we kind of said we're going to do small design up front, and we never did. It's just like, start slapping the keyboard, and Rails knew, off we go. We're going to be millionaires, right? No, that's not a good idea. So, but at the same time, we couldn't kind of have like, let's just do big design up front, but just have everyone write it more quickly, or automate some of the the stuff to adjust. Like, maybe the code can, if the compiler can have another artifact, which is the adjustments to friggin' UML. No, that doesn't work. Well, the state was the focus. Fred Brooks, back to his insight, was that if I just forget about the how and just look at what is the state over time, that's the requirement that actually gives me the in-between. Like, it's just that small design up front so that I know that I'm successful, and I don't give a shit how you did that. I don't even care about your code quality, because if I have my design up front, I don't have to go refactor your code. I have a very strong contract of what your state was before and what the state was after. As long as your shitty code is doing that and is doing it performantly, without causing out of memory exceptions or taking a minute to run, I'm fine. You might have had the worst coding style and used the worst classes, and you're an idiot for doing this. This is called don't ask principle. The thing works. Leave it alone. And it's not affecting your next step that you're doing in the workflow at all. If that step ever has a problem or has to be replaced, it's an entire throwaway and a re-implementation by someone else. And now we're doing it with entirely different languages. If I hired someone that's now a Clojure person, and the person that wrote that slice before was .NET, I don't care. I know the contract, and now we're trying to basically converge all sorts of stacks. With serverless, it's becoming even easier. This function's written in Go. Okay, cool. The next one's written in C#. Cool. Still works, right? We're still reading the same event store, same source of events. All that stuff is still consistent between them. So we have a really good way to tie those separate things together. And now we don't have to be, the problem with like code reviews is that they're subjective. You have someone that's like the 5-year senior, and then you have the 20-year-old senior that's just done the first year over and over again, and just based on seniority, they're doing a different kind of code audit. So it's incredibly subjective, right? So I hate code reviews because it's just a power play. It's like all these optics and like, oh, I know, I've studied more books than you. I will guide you. You shall be blessed with my frickin' presence to rescue you from your stupid attempts at writing code. Like horrible. Imposter syndrome. It's a cause of imposter syndrome. It's just dumb. And if someone's slow, like at least they're new. We had a person that wanted to switch from Java to JavaScript, and at first they're slow, but because we were doing things in this way of getting each workflow step automated, we paid a fixed price for each one. So sure, he got paid the same thing. It took him 3 times as long as anyone else, but he understood that, and that was fine. He'd rather do that than actually get paid nothing, go and pay for a course and not make any money for 3 months. He said, okay, I'll just learn on the job if you can pay me. Well, okay, cool. I'm not sacrificing any quality. Like if you're an apprentice making horseshoes as a blacksmith, some of those are good. The blacksmith will sell them, right? A lot of them are crap and you throw them away. Your productivity of how many horseshoes you produce in a day is low, but it doesn't mean that you can't sell them if they're good. So that's exactly the same approach that we take. Just if you have an event model with everything in there, like showing what screens people see, how the state changes over time, that one piece of workflow either does that or it doesn't. End of story. And you could be black, white, purple, man, woman, I don't care. You could be junior, senior, you could be 70 years old or 90 years old. I'm not even ageist. It doesn't matter. And that's why we've probably had maybe one interview the whole time the company's existed in 5 years. So we don't fucking care. It's not subjective. If it actually works, it works. There's no reason for me not to pay you. And that's how you remove these things. So the industry is full of shit where people can use subjectivity to use their thumb to press you down, step on your neck, climb a ladder, whatever. You got to look at how companies that were flat orgs actually kind of continued to grow, like GitHub, Valve, all these things. Yeah, sure, there's jerks there too, like anywhere else, but they continue to thrive with no management structure. I mean, GitHub did add that because they got bought by Microsoft, and then, that's just a better thing to acquire because it looks like something that we know. Well, whatever. How's that for a rant?
It's right up my alley.
Yeah, that was basically what I was going to mention about what you were talking about, Derek, with just the fact that if you use like an event model kind of approach, then you can fix price slices, and right, you get paid based on how much output you produce, right? So as opposed to kind of, hey, we're sitting in an office not doing anything and just getting paid for staring at a screen. Yeah, you have like other developers right next to that guy who's 20 times more productive, if not more, and paid like a fraction more. So
yeah, it's interesting.
It's appealing.
I think the one thing that always stands out to me, and I don't know what, maybe it's becoming more popular, maybe it's not, I'm not exactly sure. It's just this mental shift of thinking about, you said it a few times, of just, and you've alluded to it in different ways, it's just this workflow of, things occurring, moving to the next step. Given this set of events, given this set of series of things that have happened, this is the next step or one of steps, possible outcomes, right? I can do this or I can't. That's that vertical slice, right? And then given that it succeeds, what's going to kick off the next thing potentially, or what's going to kick out, like, based off of the event that it produces.
Yeah, and we have patterns for all that. Yeah.
So the thing is, though, is that, like, I feel like I have no, just other than, reading the Hacker News of the world and all this other stuff that's out there, and that still feels very not as accepted, or not as
yeah.
I don't know what the right word is. It's still the vast majority.
It's not mainstream.
No, not even close yet. I mean,
and it's
but
and
you
it's
have
not complicated enough. It's too simple for people to be
well,
like,
but here's the thing, and I've had
it works. No.
conversations with other people about this, is that you have this concept of messaging that I think is becoming more popular, and then you have things like Kafka that are becoming more popular, but but then I'm lost on the disconnect here.
Yeah, so there's different levels of inertia, and there's different motivations, and there's the tooling, right? And I think Bobby Calderwood, who's doing the ONote automated sort of system for generating code out of an event model, right? It's an entire platform that we're collaborating on to do this properly. Finally, he says that it's the tooling that exists out there. It's really the 50 years of the initial dealing with RDBMS, not being able to store any kind of information. This it's not an old way of thinking. It's the tooling that's kind of pressed us there. Those were the tools that no longer are as relevant, but because they're so damn good, because we've had like 50 years of refinement on them, they're still like they're the best horse and buggy carriages that money can buy. There's incredibly well put together, but we have the first car here, right? And it's going to take time for people to realize that, this is where I want to be. I want to have a breadcrumb trail of wherever I go to. I want a proper audit trail. I want to be able to do fixed bid. I don't want to have to do any kind of stand-ups and have subjectivity thrown in. So there's a bunch of detractors, right? I mean, people said the same thing about electricity. Edison was electrocuting elephants and stuff. Like, it's just like, the amount of arrows and daggers in my back is insane. Because I say that you shouldn't use X or Y or Z, and that's like 50 people's in this company bread and butter, and you're basically telling them that they're using the wrong thing. So, okay, fine. I mean, I try to be politically correct about how I say these things, that maybe you should try this, maybe we should try a combination. You can have event sourcing and traditional sitting side by side, do the sidecar approach, do these things. This is another tool for your tool belt. Well, the secret is that this tool is kind of like the Swiss Army knife, or like the multi-purpose screwdriver that just allows you to lighten your tool belt. It's not just a tool in your tool belt. It's a tool in your tool belt that'll allow you to throw away like 50% of the other things you have hanging around on you, right? And that's the important thing for people to realize. It's that, once you have a car, you don't have to have a stable, you don't have to feed your horse, you don't have to buy a new one when it dies. It's kind of that kind of mentality.
Yeah, I mean, I'll comment on that. I tried doing an event modeling with the company I work at, and it's just very like seamless between like discussing with the people who know what, for example, what events exist in the domain, how things should flow. It makes it like visual, so people are like, "Oh, I didn't realize this actually affected that screen or whatever," right?
Yeah.
So just that alone makes a huge difference. And then, I mean, as far as implementation, that's a different story. But
well, that's two things. So we're talking about two different things. So there's event sourcing in CQRS, and there's event modeling. Event modeling kind of destroys Agile. Event sourcing kind of destroys the traditional RDBMS. And so I'm trying to show that event modeling is still applicable to traditional systems. That's why the second article that I wrote on that, it actually does show that. You can show, data in rows changing over time. The events still are there because that is the truth. That's actually what you have in your brain. That is the proper event. When I register, I remember my password, my username, my email, and I certainly remember what the name, my first and last name is that I typed into that form. That is the truth. That is the event that happened. Now, whether I have a hash stored in that table of my password, that's a different story, but that's fine. At least I know that there's what actually happened and then what the system recorded. I can show that. And then we start to look, and people that have done event modeling for traditional systems, they have all these rows, these swim lanes for different rows of data, and they can show where the data gets clobbered, where the coupling is, and all those kinds of things. But they start to look at it and go like, why are we not keeping these orange things? Look at all the crap we're doing down here. Like, why don't we just keep these orange things up here that are the events that actually have a perfect storage place for what happened, right? And so it's a better way to really introduce the concept and show how an event-sourced set of data could start to live alongside traditional set of data. If you're not doing event sourcing, you're still doing DDD, and you have bounded context, and you're starting to look at, maybe CQRS without event sourcing, you're starting to look at islands of data. Even before that, even with ORMs, you really wanted to have an eager fetch just to be able to, get a little island of information. Well, if you do that correctly, we might as well use a document database, right? So we kind of came to these realizations as we went through things. So event modeling is just a way to demonstrate that, like, crystal clear that this is what you're doing. Why don't you just do the next thing, right? Maybe I don't need tables, or maybe I should have tables that separate these things out because I hate this, this coupling that I have here. These are the people who are working on payment. These are the people who are working on sales and inventory, and I can see that they're clobbering their work all the fucking time. It's awful. And so, okay, let's duplicate the data and let's each of these people have their own rows in their own tables. So now you get into multiple schema, gets you into thinking about multiple models, and it's a natural progression because I wish that we didn't have to suffer. I wish Moore's law applied first to storage instead of processing. God damn it! Like, I wish just disks. I wish there was a magnetic tape type of transistor renaissance that happened, right? Because then we wouldn't have this problem. We would have, imagine having like a 2 terabyte disk drive, but you were still using vacuum tubes on for your processing, right, in the 1950s, right? So before the transistor. That's awesome because you can still store as much as you want. You'd be very slow at processing things. So if that happened, we'd be in a different world. And so now we just have to undo like many decades of being able just to, trust that we can store all these other things. And, it's great that we have all these really mature things that can look at RDBMS systems and stuff like that. But the other tooling's catching up. So I'm going to bet on what's going to be there in the future, not try to keep things in the past. I'm not gonna give, I'm not going to invest in oil companies or coal companies.
It's a good way.
So I just wanted to highlight just this idea that with domain-driven design, in the Blue Book, the idea of domain events wasn't even that concept isn't even in the Blue Book. Mm-hmm. It was kind of discovered, or whatever you want to call it, afterwards, or emerged, or whatever. Mm-hmm. And you hear there's this comment or whatever, the view that aggregates should represent your storage, essentially, like they should be the unit of storage, which is why I think a lot of people are excited about document databases, because then you can kind of map aggregates to documents, I guess. But what's, to me, it's kind of like, why, the whole idea of the domain events, it's funny, like with event storming, it's a focus on the events. And then you throw it away, and then you focus on how you're storing your data. That's what an aggregate is. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like another roundabout way of saying what you said, but it's funny how, what if, it's just like, what if you just kept the events? Like you just worked this whole thing through with the people who understand the business. Just keep the events. What would happen?
It's actually the fastest way to learn programming and to realize that this is all we're doing. The first thing you do after you click a button on a form is just store the damn thing as fast as you can. Just write to disk. Boom. Just say call. That's what happened. Gather all the stuff. Write this. That's the most responsible thing. Don't try and gather it and format it and blah blah blah. Just write that down. The other stuff is secondary. You can validate, you can do everything else. As I was saying, the first thing you do is just capture the fact. And as you walk an event model, and let's say you're brand new, you don't even know what a database is. You don't even know what RDBMS is. The first thing you can do is just use a standard library with JavaScript or Go or whatever, and you can follow every line in the event model and just implement. And you can see how you automate every single thing all the way through. And you never would have had to touch a book on RDBMS, ORM. That's what makes it simple. So it's actually, if you look at the concepts at play for automating information systems, an event source system that you're following through from an event model is the fastest way to actually do automation of an information system the fastest. Like that's the thing that'll have the fewest moving things at all. Anyway, I just wanted to close off with the giant workshop coming up in November. Check out my Twitter I have a pinned tweet all about it, and it's also on our corporate site. If you want to learn about event modeling, eventmodeling.org, or just Google event modeling. It's the first thing that comes up. The book's coming out. People that get to the workshop will get an initial copy of it, and then public release is happening probably around January. So I know people have been asking for the event modeling book, so it's coming. It's almost there, and if you go to the workshop, you learn all this stuff. It's intense. It's like 40 hours, Monday to Friday, A to Z, from boardroom to implementation and maintenance. If people are brand new, you have a new company, or you have new people that have started, and you want to do modern approaches, send them to this thing. It's probably like $8,000 worth of workshops stuffed together in one for 1/10 the price. So don't miss out. That's my plug at the end.
Awesome. Appreciate you doing this. This is cool.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Loosely Coupled Show. If you did, please subscribe for more on software architecture and design.